Our gracious Heavenly Father, let's thank you for this day, this beautiful weather, this fall colors, and give each and every one of us the wisdom and strength to do your work for the Cherokee people. Make each one of us mindful of all the blessings that we have, and remember our troops overseas. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. Thank you. Roll call.
Meredith Bailey. Here. Gil Anglin.
Here.
Bill John Baker.
Here.
Jack Baker.
Here.
Bradley Cobb.
Me.
Julia Coates. Here. Jody Fishinghawk. Here. Janelle Fulbright. Here. Tina Glory Jordan.
Present.
Chet Hoskin Jr.
Here.
Sarah Callan Watts.
Mahoney. We have a quorum, and would you like to be added, Mr. Garvin and Mr. Snell? Is there anyone else? Jack Baker?
Go ahead and add me on.
Okay. Appreciate you coming in an hour early to talk about this discussion regarding the election law, how we might make it better. I guess the main objective of this election law is to build trust in our election process and make, usually it's not, I don't think it's people, I usually think it's process that creates problems. And if we can make it better, I think that, and I think we can, but what I want from you is to tell me how you would like these subcommittee meetings to be held and what decision the subcommittee comes up with, and we report that back to rules. And if you want some of the former election commissioners to be involved, perhaps we should do that. And and also I've had a suggestion that perhaps the Carter Commission could be involved again. I don't know if you all want to do that. That's something we can consider. And some of the points that I thought needed addressing were, how do we optimize voter turnout? How do we educate our voters on the process? Because I know in Mays County, I guess I haven't been doing a good job. They still don't understand the total process. Is the current registration deadline, or is that effective? I know last term we talked about instant runoff. Do we want to consider that again? Redistricting, how do we redistrict, Jody? Instant runoff.
It's an election process. I'll get you some information on it. And also registration. I had probably the most complaints I received in Mays County was on registration. A lot of them think the blue card's enough. I think we discussed that last term. So that was, I thought this could just be an organizational meeting as to find out how you would like to do this. You want to take it out to the community to vote with your constituents. Do you want to meet monthly? Do you want to meet quarterly? How do you think we can best make this a better process? So I'll throw it open. And this is very informal. It's a subcommittee, so I'll throw it open for discussion. Yeah, Ms. Fulbright?
Okay. I had a lot of complaints too about people being misinformed. They thought they could vote with the blue card, which we know that you can't, because I don't know how you could let people just vote with that blue card, because if they aren't registered in a particular district, how would they know their name wouldn't be on a roll book? You know, I don't know how that would work, but I just thought that we need to move the deadline up so that it would just maybe close it like 30 days, more like what the state does, instead of closing it. People just think, you know, right at the last minute, oh, I wish I had an absentee ballot, or I wish I had registered, but they don't do it soon enough. And a big problem we have, I don't think we have enough voting precincts in our county, because the people in the NICUT area have to drive 20-something miles to vote, and they just practically don't.
That's a good point. Anyone else?
Talking more about how we're going to structure the committee, or about some substantive ideas, or just anything is really what you're asking.
Mm-hmm. Right. This is more an organizational meeting of how do you want this subcommittee to work in order
to make this an effective process.
I'd like to see us all, just like Councilor, those were great points. I'd like to see maybe in advance of the next meeting, maybe circulate those things electronically. That way we're prepared to discuss them. And if we could all just undertake to do that, it would be helpful. And then try to figure out a order of business at the meeting.
Okay, great. Mr. Baker?
Yeah, and identify some of the problem areas, the problem spots, the things that aren't working. And I mean, around here, the biggest example is people are registered to vote. They've been registered to vote, but they've moved. So they're still registered to vote, but only at the old address. And the Election Commission believes, the staff believes, that they cannot upgrade those addresses. That unless that person physically comes in and requests that their address be changed, even though a mailing service knows where they live now and knows it's the same person, they still giving us the bad addresses. Well, I don't know about you, but I spent several $1,000s that was for naught. That just came back in the mail, and you knew it was going to come, and I even shared good addresses with them. They said, no, we can't change the addresses to make them good because that person has to come in and do it. Well, if they vote every time and they walk in, those addresses are going to be bad from now on. And either make a law that they can change the addresses, or give the old address with what they believe is the good best address, or re-register.
Remember, that was a major issue last time, the bad addresses.
Well, in the time before, and
I think Julia, you were first, and then Ms. Fishing Hawk.
In terms of the process, I was just curious. The goal is to come up with informative legislation around our election procedures, and do we have any sense of a timeline for when we would like to reach that goal in terms of how often we would meet and all that kind of thing?
And that's up to the subcommittee. You want it done a year before the next election?
Hopefully before that.
That's up to the subcommittee, how often you want to meet, etc. Jody?
I want to suggest an ethics commission.
Ethics?
Yes, just like at the state level.
You want to consider an ethics commission?
Yes, very much so.
Todd, you want to say something?
What I would recommend for the committee's pleasure would be that you meet monthly. Diane and I have gone through, and Melanie have gone through 2 cycles of election law revisions. It takes a tremendous amount of time, and it's something that gets put off and put off and put off, and then before you know it, you're a year before the election and you're under the gun. I would recommend monthly meetings, and I would set a regular date, maybe a few hours before your regular council meeting, and before your next council meeting or next subcommittee meeting, all of you jot down your ideas that we're talking about here today, and look over the election law section by section, and make a list of just ideas for reform, and submit them to Shelley or myself so we can distribute them throughout everybody to everyone, because this is going to be a time-consuming process, and each year, I think we make the election, or each election cycle, we make the election law a little bit better. Well, we have to also be cognizant of the fact that after this election cycle, you're going to have elections every 2 years. And so if there's going to be some major reform or major revisions done, it needs to happen, and I would like to have this committee set a deadline that you have your election laws reformed midway through your term, or within 2 years before the election, because the closer you get to the election, the more politicized this is going to become. It's happened each time. So if we start now and we put it, put a lot of time and effort into it, I think 2 years before the election, you'll have a pretty good reform.
Thank you, Todd. Brad? Dr. Cobb?
Well, I probably jumped the gun. I know we're just talking about how we're going to do things, but I did want to address, I'll jot this down, but one of the problems that we've had in our district, and I've talked to Councilor Hoskin about South Coffeyville, is there was a lot of confusion when and the deadline came up. And the reason I'm bringing this up is Todd was talking about deadlines. If I remember correctly, and if somebody has another take on this, correct me. By January of this year, you had until like March. You had 3 months to decide if you were at large or you were going to stay in your district. And that form was extremely confusing because there were 2 spaces to mark there, and if you marked one of them wrong, you automatically got put at large. And I know we've got a huge border with Osage County, and we've got, how many voters did you think we probably lost? About 600 voters, simply because they didn't know, they didn't understand, they thought they were registered, just like Councilor Baker made a comment. And I know that at least it was put forth that this is your one and final chance to, well, there's a lot of people that are very upset that was their one and final chance, and they didn't understand that now they're an at-large voter. And I don't know if there's any other districts. I would guess, and I'll let Councilor Hoskin, talk on that there's some voters in Coffeyville that fell into the same situation. But that's the only reason I wanted to concur with what Todd said is that was a timing issue, and it was like 3 months, and that was it. And so I just don't want to see us falling. I think 2 years is probably a really good goal to get this taken care of.
Accomplished. Okay, thank you. Kara?
Thank you. I would like to make a motion that we meet every time at 3 o'clock prior to the resources meeting, prior to the regular tribal council meeting.
Until we get this
Until we get it resolved with an end goal date that we are done within 2 years of the next election.
I second that.
Moved and seconded. I guess we can go ahead and take a vote. All in favor, aye.
I'd like to offer a friendly amendment.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to move the deadline up to September 08. And the reason is because we have this legal case working, and we want to try to get this done before the court rules on it, if possible.
I accept.
I do too.
All right. The amendment is to have this concluded and resolved and all election law done by September 2008.
Right, correct.
So we're going to have to work hard to get that done. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Let's see. Chuck.
Sure. And I echo what Councilor Cobb said. I mean, there were a great number of voters across the line in Coffeyville who missed the deadline. There was, I think it's fair to say, ambiguous language in the information that went out to voters. The timeliness of that information was an issue, and that's something administratively the commission has to deal with. We can certainly address it. And then, Madam Speaker, the other thing I would add is I would like to see the commissioners be requested to report to us with what they would like to see election reform. We don't have to accept it. They're supposed to be the experts, and we ought to some extent rely on them. And then secondly, as with what Councilor Baker said about, do we need to do something different with the updating the registration? I'd be interested in see what other, whether it's Indian nations or states, do in terms of updating their election rules. I mean, there may be some policy considerations with unilaterally accepting a change of address from a private service. Those private services are typically correct, but maybe there's some policy considerations that other states or other Indian nations have dealt with, or maybe they've had great success with updating their. And so maybe we could reach out to some other Indian nations in the state of Oklahoma and ask them what they do, and maybe they would report to us or send us something in writing.
Great. Todd, did you want to respond to his?
Yeah, one thing about Councilman Hoskin brought up the commissioners. We are aware that within 6 months from the last election cycle, the terms of the election commissioners ended. So there is no election commission right now. With this in mind, I know that I've spoken with Secretary Knight about the administration's plans on appointing 2 members of the election to the election commission. Also, I would echo that to this body that I think the quicker you get an election commission seated, the better. And you all might be thinking about that process, because this body has 2 carte blanche appointments. The chief has 2 carte blanche appointments. Those 4 get together to pick a 5th that is confirmed by both the principal chief and the council.
And that process may take some time to develop, and maybe we would wait on the new commissioners to be seated, but I would actually be interested in extending the invitation to our now former commissioners, because they have the day-to-day experience.
Exactly.
And I would think they would consider it a public service to come before us, maybe we put something in writing, but they probably have some ideas that we ought to hear about. Thank you.
Jude, Ms. Cook, where'd you go? Ms. Cook, Don, and then Brad, and then...
Well, this is not about our meetings, but it's about redistricting. The Constitution plainly says that you're going to have 15 districts, and they should be as close to equal size as possible. We almost got that done during the last council. We had one person that flip-flopped right at the last minute and they didn't get it done. But anyway, that needs to be the number one thing. And, we're working with the court. While this is working, whichever one gets through first, I guess, wins. But, anyway, I think that should be number one, is redistricting.
Don, I'm sorry. Are you filing for something to redistrict or something with the court? I didn't understand what you said.
Yes, we're working on it right now to get things together so that the court
And
can
some kind of a
15
judgment or
districts.
something?
I think we can do it better than they can, really. But we didn't do it last time.
Okay.
We got close. Got close on the counts and horseshoes, ballroom dancing, and hand grenades.
Julia?
You got a question?
You had your hand up earlier.
I think I was going for where Kara was going.
Okay.
Where Kara went.
Brad, you had another comment?
I would respectfully say, just a smidgen above what your first priority is. We can sit here and come up with great ideas, but unless we get people back to your original comment, the voter turnout is abysmal. And I would like to see some discussion. I mean, we can have the greatest election laws in the world. If people don't vote, it doesn't make any difference. I'd like to see some discussion on some ideas. You had mentioned the Carter Center. I mean, I'd like to just have a little bit of discussion on, eventually, have some thoughts on how to get these people out to vote.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's the priority.
Chuck, you had your hand
Well,
up.
I just had a question, Councilor Garvin. The litigation you were talking about earlier, was that litigation in connection with redistricting? Is that what you meant?
And we're just getting started on it.
And earlier when you offered the friendly amendment, was that in connection with that litigation that we ought to get? That was separate. That was the pre-petition, correct?
We're just trying to,
Okay.
I think we can drag this out for 4 or 5 years real easily on this one.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just wanted to make sure I had a handle on what litigation
It hasn't
sort of
started
was
yet.
an impetus for us to vote. Okay.
Todd, did you have a comment in regard to Mr. Hoskin?
Yes. last term, there was a declaratory judgment case filed jointly with Attorney General Ammons and I for the court to answer a number of questions. The court refused to answer those questions, stating that that was an advisory opinion. So there's no court action as of yet. I believe Councilman Garvin, they are contemplating a lawsuit if we can't get something that, well, depending on the election law reform, or is that going to be simultaneous? I don't know, but at any rate, as Councilman Dr. Cobb stated, there are a number of issues of equal importance that you can have the best car in the world and you ain't got the gas, it ain't going nowhere, and and that's why I think it's important for the and this discussion is good, but for each council person to go through this election law, take 30 minutes, an hour, and just jot down issues. Let's get them all out on the table, and then we can start getting down to work next month.
Kara, and then Chuck had another question. Chuck, is it in regard to what he said?
It is, but I'd yield to Kara.
Okay, Kara.
Thank you. There's a couple of things I'm concerned about some of the comments because, first of all, I thought it was a constitutional issue that mandated the time frame for folks to declare whether or not they were at large or remaining in their districts. So, despite what people think, I mean, we would have to go back and amend the Constitution in order to affect anything to do with that issue, is my understanding. And then the other thing is, unless we're going to do compulsory voting in that we're going to tie like services and all sorts of things or tags to requiring people to register to vote, I don't know how supportive I would be that folks aren't going to be willing to change their address on their own because that's their personal information in that. And so, no other government that I know goes out and does a national change of address and pays for changes to people's voter. It's a privilege, and they should take it as such to make sure that their records are updated. The other thing is I would like to drive election law reform and not volunteers who are put on an election commission. They are there to interpret what we did and implement, and this body should drive that. We should not wait in any form or fashion on an election commission to be seated. But with that, to move forward, I would like to make a motion that at the January rules meeting, this body bring forward their nominees for the election commission.
Second.
January rules.
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Bring forward election commission nominee
for the council.
Okay, and Mr. Garvin seconded that?
Yes.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign? Getting all that down, Madam Secretary?
As fast as my little hand will go.
Okay. You want to say a few words?
Yes, I was just wanting to comment. Speaking of who's the election commission, you guys are the election commission. Rules committee is election commission. When you don't have a commission in place, you are the commission. So, if it's up to you if you want to appoint them or not, as long as you guys are in control. So that's a choice you want, you guys can make. But as far as suggestions on trying to get people to vote, one time there was money set aside for that election commission to go to every community out there and get people to come to the meeting so that they could inform them on what was going on, how to vote, and what needs to be done. And there was money set aside for that. You set aside money for the state election, but you don't set money aside for the tribal election. That's one of the things I think you need to look at. If you're going to inform the voters out there, you need to get out there. And if you don't, they're not going to be informed. I know the last two elections, nobody's been out there to inform the people until it's too late. So I think one of the things we might look at is if before it gets started in January, you might start looking at trying to get people out in those communities to inform them on what's going on, get their ideas. That's what it's about. At least you'd have a lot better idea of what needs to be done to help those people to vote, and then you can start working on that too. But until you do, you know, we're still back in the same boat we were until we find out where they, and I think we need to bring the workers over to the election commission, the commissioners that we hear, and the guy that puts the election on, because he has good ideas of what needs to be changed too. So I think that's just some of the things I see that you need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chuck?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, I mean, I agree, we drive election reform, so no question in my mind about that, but we certainly ought to avail ourselves of people that have dealt with the issue on a day-to-day basis. I don't think we should delay. I think we should promptly reach out to the former commissioners, maybe the last board, and invite them. They could choose not to invite them to suggest changes. We certainly have our own expertise, and we can decide whether those suggestions have merit or not. And then secondly, I just want to make sure I understand about this litigation. I know it hasn't been filed yet, but are we going to be essentially legislating against the backdrop of election law litigation? Is that, Mr. Hembry, what I understand? And that happens. I understand that happens all the time. We legislate against that kind of a backdrop. But is there some clock ticking here that we need to be mindful of? That there's, I guess I don't fully appreciate.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I understand that there may be some litigation filed. I'm not a party to that litigation. However, I do believe that, as Mr. Garvin had stated earlier, normally a legislative body can do a better job than a court can. And if, you know, be mindful of your task and do it in a good, diligent manner. I have more faith in these 17 collective minds than the 5 collective minds on the court, to be honest with you. I think you all can do a better job, and if you all, and if that's for the record, if that comes back to haunt me, I'll deal with it if the time comes. But no, I wouldn't say that you're under the gun or a time frame. Just we're starting now. We're starting early. And I believe that a lot of, with a deadline of September 08, I mean, you'll have a good idea where you're going real quick. And I think that's the most I can tell about it.
Thanks, Todd. That all, Terry? Yes. Ms. Fulbright, and then Kara, and then Jody.
Well, I could talk all night about this because I ran into so many things, the election commission, I can't enumerate them all. But one thing Dr. Cobb brought up was about these people living in the border and the outlying areas. Well, first off, all the people in Fort Smith, Arkansas, because that's right next to where we vote, they had been used to driving over to Mulville and voting. Okay, they had bad addresses. They did not get their letter. The letter said it was sent out in November or December. You must return it by January if you wanted to retain to vote for a local council instead of being at large. Well, they didn't get the letter, and then when they went to vote over at Mulville, where they'd been voting every time, they were turned away. You're an at-large voter because the addresses were bad. So my problem is, like, how are we going to do to fix these addresses? Well, every time you go to the clinic, and that's where most people go all the time, if you go out there 3 times a week, they ask you the same questions every time. Your address, your phone number, your insurance information. You go to the doctor again the next day, they ask you the same thing. Maybe we can set up some places there and at drivers where you get your car tags. Of course, you cannot require people to register to vote. If they aren't interested, they aren't going to. But if you'd make it more readily available to them, I think there's just got to be a lot of changes made. So, okay, thank you.
Kara?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to let everybody know, Dawn and I are having a hard time expressing ourselves maybe, but both of us as individuals in our districts are frustrated because the past process has not represented our voters well. So he and I will be joining in a declaratory judgment suit to settle the issue of redistricting if this body so chooses not to address the redistricting in a manner that the court directed us to for equal representation. So I hope that helps the lawyers at the table understand maybe where we're coming from.
So what I think I'm hearing what you're implying is that you want us to consider redistricting within the group, Rules Committee before you go to court?
We would rather settle it amongst ourselves than put the court in charge of redistricting. We would rather do it ourselves.
Okay, appreciate it. Jody?
First off, I want to say Adair County had over a 90% voter turnout at the runoff, so I'm kind of proud of that. I got my people out. Meredith, I know you got 100%, but the other thing, I want to make sure you invite the past commissioners, including the 3 office girls and Martha Calico.
Okay.
Because Martha's been on that commission numerous times and she has known so much.
Yeah.
The other thing is, no, I don't want to get into this side. I've got a question that's kind of sort of about this. The Constitution become effective, I think, the chief said July of 03.
2003.
So there was an election August of 03. And there was election of August 07. So that's the 2 terms, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's...
Since it became
I don't
effective
know.
July of 03?
I don't understand your question.
Well, I'm not wearing a black robe.
Mr. Baker, did you want to respond to
Yes.
that?
The election was in July of 03. There was no election after July of 03. The people who were elected at the general election in May of 2003, and then in the runoffs in July of 03, were then sworn into office in August of 03. They were sworn in after the vote, but not after the election.
Todd, did you want to respond to that?
Oh, well, and ladies and gentlemen, you know, being a lawyer, you can argue either way on this case, okay? There, you know, of whether the problem arose in the way the court brought down its decision. They ruled in July of 06 that the Constitution had in fact became effective July of 03, okay? 3 years retroactively. So that had put us in kind of a tailspin from there. Now the question arises, and legal scholars can differ on this, is, you know, are you on your first term or your second term? Okay. You know, and the typical question is going to be, decided by judges probably someday, is did your term begin when the votes were cast, or did the term begin when you were sworn in? You know, and that'll be the question, and that is something really that this subcommittee really shouldn't bother itself with. You're here to make election law, and what's in the past is in the past, and if it's going to be determined by a court, so be it. But that discussion, whether you're on your first term or second term, you know, has nothing to do with your prospective election law revision.
So that's that.
Is that all, Jody?
Yeah, I was just forced myself.
Okay. Mr. Crittenden?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just had a comment. Whatever we do with this election law reform, and whatever, I certainly hope we get it done in time. We could sail that on into the election and not have any last minute hurry up, do this, that, and whatever. Because I think that's one of the elements that lends to the apathy or who cares or frustration or whatever you want to call it, that people don't get the vote. So that's all the input I have is I'd like to see us get on whatever we're going to do and get it done in a timely manner so the people won't be having some knee-jerk stuff going on right at the last minute.
Creates confusion, which leads to distrust, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Mr. Baker?
Yeah, Todd, you said that the court would decide whether he goes in his first term or second term. Is that what you said?
Well, I'm not clairvoyant, but I'm pretty sure that, you know, if that
okay. Is it before the court?
No, it is not before the court at this time. But like I said, I'm not clairvoyant, but I'd bet you money that when you all refile for re-election, there's going to be somebody who's going to say that person's not eligible.
Okay.
And then that's going to be a ripe issue for the court.
Would it not be ripe now?
I think it is, but we tried that last time, and the court said, you know, as an advisory opinion. I would try to make another run at them, to be honest with you.
How could we legally get it before the court so we could know now whether we're in our first or second term.
Any help on that?
Part of the problem, the last time when we did the petition for declaratory relief, was that the Supreme Court later ruled that the district...
I can't hear.
I'm sorry. Part of the problem in the petition for declaratory relief that we filed jointly to answer some of those questions, and there was a number of them, was that the Supreme Court held that the district court didn't have jurisdiction and couldn't decide it. We could try to fashion something to get to the Supreme Court, but I really don't know whether or not that they would find that there was an actual case in controversy at this time or not. At the very, that aside, at the very, when would be the next time? The 2 years?
The next time would be filing period for the next, in 3 years, 3.5 years from now. I would take a chance at them because we didn't we pass legislation granting constitutional jurisdiction to the Supreme Court, didn't we? I'd say under that new statute that we might consider making another run at them.
I'd make a motion that we try and fashion something where that could be answered as to what term everybody's in, and rather than trying to wait until filing of election 4 years from now to even add to the confusion.
I second that.
Any further discussion?
Discussion.
Go ahead.
Well, as I understand, you're the Attorney General. You could write an opinion falling on one side or the other of this issue. Then it becomes the given way we operate unless someone attacks it in court. Then you're not asking for a declaratory judgment, you're asking for an actual decision. It would be, in my thinking, more proper for us to ask for an opinion, then whoever doesn't agree of this body could then go to court. Then they can't say you're premature.
That's a great idea.
Good idea.
Are you making a friendly amendment?
Friendly amendment, yes, to Mr. Baker's motion.
I would accept a friendly amendment to ask the Attorney General for her opinion.
You want a time frame?
We'll put it. It'd be more appropriate to do it in a letter form. Therefore, she knows precisely what the question is. We'll get a letter together.
The motion would be to ask Todd to make that request.
With the time frame.
With the time, ASAP.
Can you give us a time that's reasonable?
It depends on if we're just talking about the one question, or, for example, when we submitted that
I'd say one
lawsuit.
issue.
Okay.
One issue.
One at a time.
Within 2 or 3 weeks, then I would think would be fine.
Then I accept that. Yes.
2 weeks?
May I address the body while I find myself at the podium?
Yes,
I find myself here. We made, in my department, some notes to ourselves during the election process, things that we thought could be made better, or things that questions arose that we had to answer. And I would like to give those to Mr. Hembry so that they can be considered by the committee in this process. I would also ask if you would consider addressing the initiative and referendum statute, which is separate from election law. There were some quirks that came about with it. Obviously, we had never used it before, and boy, did we have a big issue that came up, and we had to scrutinize it very carefully. So there's some work that could be done there also.
Is that in your list of items?
We have some comments on that too.
Right. Thank you very much. Mr. Buzzard, and then Mr. Hoskin, and then...
I think that some of it's going to enter in this motion that Mr. Baker made, but I want to make a comment of what Ms. Fulbright talked about. I think it's going to have to be a convenience for these people that are ready to vote. And I would suggest that the election commission or somebody go to the car take agency, go to hospitals, go to their clinics, and sit there and ask people to register, because if it's not convenient, they're not going to register. The other thing is, if we could build an incentive into our election process when the election's over, building an incentive for people to go to vote. What it is, I don't know. You know, if there was an incentive that somebody could draw from each precinct, somebody's going to take a trip to Hawaii, you know, we might get a lot of people out to vote. I don't know how many precincts we've got. It would be a little costly, but incentive, I think, would get people out to vote. They're going to win something, you know, they're probably going to go vote. But I just think what Janelle was saying, I know we have the hippie issue with the clinics and hospitals. It looked to me like there could be something worked out. I don't know. I think I agree with Terry. It has to be a line of division if they want to change their address to vote. But I just think we need to make it as convenient as we can for these people to register, because they're not going to come in here and get the registration form to vote and probably won't do it online. So I think convenience, incentives, things like that could probably get people out to vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hoskin?
Yeah, my question was on Mr. Baker's motion, and that has been answered. Are we still in discussion on his motion? That, I don't have anything else.
Okay. Ms. Jordan?
I've already.
The Attorney General thing? Okay.
Thank you.
Someone else? Oh, Mr. Callan Watts?
Has anyone made a motion to request a bid from the Carter Commission?
No.
I'd like to make that motion now.
There's a motion on the floor.
Yeah.
No, we're not. He said it'd be more appropriate to go through a letter form.
But I thought there was going to be, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Chuck.
I had thought that we were going to perhaps amend the motion to direct, maybe we don't need a motion to do that, but to direct council.
Do we need a motion for you to do a letter to the Attorney General? Just a request?
Oh, no, any counselor individually can request an opinion of the Attorney General, so I don't think a vote needs to be done unless you just want to do that.
But we're doing it as a committee.
Okay,
and
well,
I
then
just
take your
wondered
vote.
if it's more appropriate for...
Then by all means, take a vote.
Okay. Are there any more discussion on that before we move on? All in favor, aye? Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you, Mr. Hoskin.
So I'd like
now.
to make a motion
Yeah, that's
to
your motion.
request, direct you to ask the Carter Commission for a bid for whatever cost estimate.
Do I have a second?
Yeah.
Any further discussion on the request for the Carter Commission to give us a cost estimate on what exactly? Todd?
It'd be for consultation, but I was talking with Melanie and or Secretary Knight and Attorney General Hammond's back there, and we don't believe that they charge for that service, but it would be appropriate to do an official letter of inquiry to see if we could get their assistance, and if they charge whatever fee they charge.
Kara, is that your motion then?
That sounds great.
All in favor, aye? Aye. All opposed, same sign? Okay. Is there any, Mr. Dr. Cobb?
I would like, when we all bring our next, our list, and I'm not suggesting we do this, but I wanted to explore it. I think it's out west, and I think it's Oregon. I could be completely wrong. You can vote online, and they have a secure... I'm sorry?
In state elections?
State elections. I'm not suggesting that. But we're here to explore all the opportunities, and I would like to know how, from a standpoint of security, how they pull that off. Because that may become a security issue on registration, and I want to know how they legally pull a vote off on security issues online.
Arizona does it also.
Okay.
And we've done some initial research on that. Also, at the next meeting, I'll bring some information on that, and I'll bring you information on the instant runoff.
Okay, you're going to do that then, Todd?
Yes.
Oh, golly, you're good. Some days. Ms. Jordan?
Madam Chair, I'm all for having the Carter Commission come in, but as I recall last time, we didn't listen to them. We didn't take their recommendations last time. They might be slightly, offended that we're asking them to come back. But be that as it may, I mean, I'm all for all suggestions, but first, I would like to hear from our past election commissioners, whether it be the very past ones or the ones before that, because I would like to hear what the Indians have to say about our elections before we hear what the non-Indians have to say about our election. I think we can solve our own problems within the Indian community. So that's why I would like to hear from our own commissioners and our own employees of our election commission before we hear from the Carter group. I'm all for meeting Jimmy Carter, but I don't think we listened to them last time. I don't think we took their recommendations last time.
Maybe we will this time.
We have a different council.
Ms. Calm-Watts?
Thank you. So I hear a couple of actions. I would recommend, and maybe it's a motion, that the next meeting we invite all past election commissioners to come speak to the committee. So it'd be more of a fact gathering and hearing. And then the January, so December would be election commissioners, past election commissioners, and then January we should review the old Carter Commission report. Would be the agendas for the December and January meetings. Because I think that's a lot, and to separate those out.
Okay, thank you.
And so to that end, would it be appropriate for you, Chair of this subcommittee, to formally invite, and we can find out who those people are, give them plenty of notice to come to the meeting? I would say even ask them to submit written suggestions if they can't be here, and I don't know if that needs to be in the form of a motion, but I'd like to see us reach out in a formal way.
Yeah, I made myself a note to do that. We have about 5 minutes. Any further discussion before we adjourn, and we'll meet? Thank you, Dave, for doing this. This is a survey that was done last term, and I've made copies for everybody just for your information. So I'll pass these around. Joe, you want on this?
Pardon me?
You want on this subcommittee, don't you?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, great.
Madam Chair, was Councilor Watts or Councilor Hoskins, did you all have a motion that we need to second on bringing forth the past commissioners?
I believe the chair just accepted the recommendation.
Yeah, I have to make myself a note to invite them.
And
My only comment is December's going to be awful quick to try to get them here. Should we maybe try to set that in January and give them,
I'll go ahead and ask them if they can't, and we'll reset it. Okay. Is that all right with you, Ms. Watt?
yeah, that's fine. Or we can do Carter Commission report in December. It doesn't matter to me, but I'm sure that
the report would be, Madam Chair.
Sure, go ahead.
The report will probably be easier to obtain, and we could do that in December and then give these other folks enough time to reorganize their agendas so that they could maybe come in January after the holidays.
Now, Todd's going to bring that last report from the Carter Commission for the next meeting. Is that all, Ms. Jordan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I had a motion that on the January rules, Dawn and I will be presenting a redistricting plan. And so then it can be an up or down, and then we can proceed if necessary. Or additional debate.
You said that's a motion?
Well, I'd like to request that, I guess, then on the January rules, that we will have a proposal to present on redistricting.
Okay, so we'll put that on the agenda.
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Regular motion. Regular. On rules, did you say, or the subcommittee?
I think it should be rules, probably, because we'll ask for action. Or would you recommend that it go to subcommittee?
I recommend it go through subcommittee first, and let the people think about it before it's presented to rules.
Okay, thank you. We will do that at that rules subcommittee in January.
Mr. Crittenden?
The comment Mr. Lizard had a while ago about the city to get folks out. We were talking a while back, and I said something to someone I was talking to about putting Walmart gift card at each precinct box, $500 or something. A little, just odd numbers. When you go vote, you get a number, and they draw at the end of the election period. And have a little caption, vote like you mean it, kind of like play like you mean it. Just, it's something, that might help, something like Harley was talking about, or something to get the folks out. Because a lot of people are registered, they just don't go vote.
Really don't. Any further discussion? Entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign.
Todd, I have a question.